Welcome to the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by Jock Market, where daily fantasy sports becomes a stock exchange. You can download Jock Market in the App Store right now. The Android app is coming soon. I'm Derek Van Riper here along with Jake Seeley and Brandon Funston, getting you ready for week 2 of this fantasy football season. Later in today's show, we'll be joined by Michael Beller. Emmanuel will stop by for Brit's picks, and in 15 minutes, we'll catch up with the Athletics' Jourdan Rodrigue to talk about the Los Angeles Rams ahead of their Week 2 matchup against the Eagles. We will take your questions. Send those our way on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, anywhere where you're joining us for today's show. Let's begin with the top storylines of the week. A ton of injury news to break down, guys, and it's great to have all of this information going into a Sunday. Lots of extra time to make adjustments as needed. We begin with the Lions receiving corps. Kenny Golladay out again with a hamstring injury. He will not play against the Packers. Jake, this is a pass-happy game script for the Lions going into Green Bay, being nearly a touchdown underdog. We saw Quintez Cephus pick up a team-high 10 targets last week. Marvin Jones had 8. Danny Amendola had 7. TJ Hawkinson had 5. How do you expect things to change against the Packers today with this Lions offense?
I don't think it'll change from what we saw last week. I think we'll see a lot of the same type of use, which Cephus, that was Ed's kind of guy last week, and I think he's going to be the guy again this week for what he brings to this offense, just the explosion in his game. So I think you'll see a very similar style to what you saw in week 1. Maybe hopefully a little bit more success for Marvin Jones. It was a little bit weird watching that entire game. I have a friend who's a Lions fan that was unfortunately over the house, so I saw all of it. Didn't look Marvin Jones' way a lot of the game, and I would say that's a little bit concerning this week too, with Jair Alexander potentially being part of the coverage on top of him. So maybe this is more of a Cephus and Amendola and Hawkinson game, and Marvin Jones is going to struggle until Golladay comes back.
Yeah, DeAndre Swift with that massive drop on what could have been a game-winning touchdown late in that game against the Bears. He only had 6 total touches in the opener, Brandon. Where do we go from here with this Detroit backfield as we look at Week 2?
Oh, it's just patience. Look at DeAndre Swift in that backfield. It has a uniquely different skill than Kerryon Johnson and Adrian Peterson. It's his ability in the passing game, and it wasn't on display in Week 1 so much with the big drop. But if I watched a lot of football in Week 1, and the rookies, a lot of them looked tentative. They looked slow. They looked like guys that hadn't had some practice reps in preseason games and things like that. So I think it's just patience if you're a DeAndre Swift, someone that has him on your roster. I think you just got to be patient. Keep him on your bench for now, but I think with a lot of these rookies, you're going to see them slowly evolve and get better and better and better, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah, I think he will get there. I think the fact that he was on the field in that critical situation at the end of the game says a lot about how they see him in the long run. And as we know, Adrian Peterson's not going to be out there in a lot of pass-catching situations, so if you expect the Lions to be playing from behind, DeAndre Swift should be busy, and that workload should increase this week and going forward. You can see the players who've already been ruled out scrolling across the bottom of your screen. We will get to some of your questions here in just a few minutes. A huge list so far. I mentioned Golladay before. We're going to talk about Chris Godwin in a moment. No George Kittle this week. No Michael Thomas, no Jamison Crowder, no A.J. Brown, no Phillip Lindsay, no Le'Veon Bell, and perhaps a few more names joining that group once inactives come out in about 30 minutes. Let's get to Chris Godwin, though. He's officially out with a concussion. The Bucs, of course, matching up against the Panthers today. Brandon, what's your trust level with Mike Evans after he was battling a hamstring injury throughout the week? He was upgraded last weekend from doubtful to questionable, managed to play, wasn't heavily involved. Maybe Marshawn Lattimore had a big role in the final line from Evans, but no injury designation for him this week. So how much do you trust him to lead this Bucs offense in targets in Week 2?
I mean, I don't fully trust it, but I'm ranking him as that's the case it's going to be. I feel like Bruce Arians has tipped his hand this week. We know Bruce Arians' offensive philosophy is no risk it, no biscuit. He likes to throw the ball downfield. That would favor Mike Evans. He went out and said that he felt bad not get Mike Evans more involved and that he feels bad when he doesn't get double-digit targets. And he kind of called out Tom Brady on a few things. So I feel like he's kind of tipping his hand that they really want to get Mike Evans involved this week, and it's a great opportunity to do so against Carolina. So I really think that's going to be the concerted effort. Whether it works out or not is going to be another story, but I do kind of have if I'm looking at the balance of trust, I'm a little bit more on the trustworthy side this week with Mike Evans.
Jake, how about you? Beyond Mike Evans, which of the Bucs pass catchers interest you the most in this matchup against Carolina?
I think the narrative, everybody's going to point to Scotty Miller because he plays the slot, and that's who Tommy Brady looks for and all that type of stuff, and they call him Scotty and Tommy. This fact is, it's true at this point in Tom Brady's career, but Tom Brady's not always been focused only on the slot. I mean, this could be 12 targets for Mike Evans. You could see Justin Watson getting the work outside of what Chris Godwin's role was. So I don't think like Scotty Miller's always going to turn into a must start most leagues. That's who I would go for first if you're in a deeper league, Watson. But I think this also might be a little bit more run heavy than people are assuming, especially because two of the probably four best defenders on the Panthers quote unquote defense are out this week as well. So this might be like a Ronald Jones game, as crazy as that thing is, like to trust Arians that he's going with Ronald Jones again. But maybe even see a little bit more Leonard Fournette. That I'm not starting Leonard Fournette, but I don't know that I would just go so overly aggressive in starting Miller or Watson.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see how much more Leonard Fournette gets involved in Week 2. Definitely a run-heavy situation with the Bucs expected to protect a lead throughout this game. We have a related question here from Daniel. Who benefits more from the injuries in their respective offenses for this week? Is it Quintez Cephus or is it Scotty Miller? So if you're looking to the wire to start one of those guys, who do you go with, Jake?
It's Miller. Because he just comes down to like pecking order here. We just saw Cephus without Kenny Golladay. You still have Hawkinson. You still have Marvin Jones. You still have Amendola. Marvin Hull gets involved. DeAndre Swift in the backfield. Whereas you look at the Buccaneers, we know the running back struggled to pass catch. So it's really Mike Evans is back. The tight ends are so involved. I mean, Scotty Miller could essentially be the number 2. Not that I think, again, he's a must start, but it's definitely Miller over Cephus.
Do you agree with that, Brandon?
Yeah, I would. I think he's safer. I mean, the thing about Cephus is he is a vertical guy, and they took shots. I mean, you love to see the 10 targets, but it was, this is a good defense for the Packers. At least secondary, they have some talent, and I just think from a safety standpoint, Miller's a better way to go for sure.
Now we got one more question, Brandon. Keenan Allen or Scotty Miller for this week?
Gosh.
Really? You're hesitating?
No. I just think, you know what? I'm just so down on Keenan Allen, but he's going to get the targets, and they're probably going to have to throw a decent amount against the Chiefs. So I will go with Keenan Allen. But, man, I struggle with that, with how that relationship with him and Tyrod Taylor looked in Week 1. So, but, yeah, give me Allen.
Bust the narrative. He had the same relationship as Mike Williams. He only had 4. The problem was it was 4 fewer air yards per target. That's why Mike Williams had the better day. They were actually out there almost the same amount, ran almost the same amount of snaps, had almost the same amount of targets. It's just the air yards was the difference.
Yeah, but if you watch the game, you would say, gosh, this is looking better going forward for Mike Williams.
It looks like that's why. But if you look at the numbers, he was involved just as much. Like, you're right, but it's the air yards. That's why I do think Mike Williams is a significant threat. But I mean, I know let's not kick Keenan Allen to the curb.
I'm not, but I just think it's going to be a down year overall for Keenan. You look at his last 3 years, I don't think he's going to approach those numbers, to be honest with you.
I think this is a good sort of truth week, though, for the Chargers offense. If they can't get it going trying to play catch-up against the Chiefs, like, we can really start to panic about Tyrod Taylor and that passing game. They did not look great in Week 1 against the Bengals. Let's talk about George Kittle. He is dealing with a sprained MCL in his left knee. Usually that's an injury that knocks a player out for a couple of weeks. There is some hope that he is going to play in Week 3. But for this week, just focusing on Week 2, Jake, looking first at the San Francisco offense, is Jordan Reed a must-start with Kittle out for the Niners?
I don't think he's a must start. I think that people are going to go after him, and there's certainly if you need a tight end, but there's still a lot of tight ends to start the season that I would go in front of him, including some that people are frustrated after just 1 week. I think Hayden Hurst, he was out there just as much, actually slightly more than Russell Gage, but it just happened to be a Russell Gage week. So I think he's on the fringe. He's I would say top end tight end 2 range. But still, Jordan Reed, at this point of his career, not even the concussions aside, like he's not the must-start Jordan Reed we used to know. I think a lot of people are overlooking Kendrick Bourne. Everybody's just assuming Ayuk as a rookie and essentially what will be his first start. I think there's a lot of options on this team. Again, run heavy, I think what we expect. But I don't think it's just a must-start for Reed, and I don't think that Ayuk's a must-start either. Again, I think that Kendrick Bourne could be I would be tempted to play Kendrick Bourne in some lineups.
Yeah, I think with Bourne, he's probably the clear-cut favorite to easily lead this team in targets. Maybe a question as to how much they're going to have to throw it against the Jets. I mean, like the Jets offense against that San Francisco defense could be a really, really ugly day. We'll get to the Jets here in just a moment. Brandon, who are some of your favorite widely available tight ends for the Kittle owners out there who don't already have a replacement ready? I mean, part of the benefit of drafting an elite tight end, you don't necessarily roster a backup. So who should you turn to on the wire if you're looking for a replacement there?
Well, Chris Herndon, you just mentioned the Jets. He's more than 50% available, at least in Yahoo leagues. 7 targets out of the gate. No Jamison Crowder. It's not a great matchup, but you could see him at least getting volume this week. I would say Logan Thomas was kind of at the top of the waiver wire list this week, but he's still available in about 70% of leagues. He led the the Washington football team, in targets with 8 targets. O.J. Howard, we haven't mentioned him with Chris Godwin out. He had a decent 6 targets last week, and that could continue to be the case this week as well with Godwin out. So I think those are 3 guys that are fairly widely available. And Jordan Reed, I would throw him into that mix as well. And he's almost, I think it's like around 90% available. So still a lot of Jordan Reed out there.
Let's help out Dan, who wants to know Logan Thomas or Noah Fant in a PPR league for this week. What do you think, Jake?
I have Logan Thomas as a tight end 1 this week, so there you go. Number 12, Noah Fant's not there. Noah Fant's getting the Steelers, and Logan Thomas essentially was kind of the number 2. I know it's sounds a little bit overreactionary to 1 week, but he is the usage over Steven Sims right behind McLaurin.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think I without looking right now, I think I have these guys relatively close, but I can go with Logan Thomas getting
for the footballs. Brandon was the first one to screw it up this year.
I know.
It was inevitable. It was inevitable.
I've been so good everywhere with that, and then suddenly just, you let your guard down, and that's what happens.
Got a question here from Michael. Will Funston say to Jake what he said on the podcast yesterday, Cooksey? I assume that's about Jared Cook.
Oh, yes. He wants me to tell you that in the last 12 games for Jared Cook, he's been a tight end 1 in 11 of them, and was only tight end 14 in the game that he didn't land it there. So he's been one of the most consistent tight ends in fantasy football for almost going on a full season.
Jake has no comment. He's already said his piece about Jared Cook, so we are going to move on to Saints.
It will derail the show if we...
Yeah, no. Watch what happens this week when he's inside the top 5 for everybody, including myself, is when he lets everybody down in Jared Cook fashion.
That's usually how it goes. Speaking of the Saints, Michael Thomas out with that high ankle sprain. So I think the question here, Brandon, is should we lower the overall expectations for the Saints offense without Thomas on the field this week?
A little bit, not a lot. I mean, they didn't have Emmanuel Sanders last year. He's a talented receiver, so he's going to help, keep that offense afloat. But look, it's Drew Brees, and it's not like he's throwing the ball downfield. He's picking people apart little by gradually. He can do that with Alvin Kamara and Jared Cook and Emmanuel Sanders. I know Jake likes Traequan Smith. I'm not gonna hype him up too much, but there are other talented people in this offense. Sean Payton is a smart offensive mind. So, and again, this is a soft Carolina defense. We saw the Raiders and what Josh Jacobs did to them last week. I just think the Saints have plenty of weapons to make their offense roll this week.
I think they can do plenty of damage against the Raiders. I think, week in and week out, if you give them some tougher matchups, maybe that creates some problems. But, Jake, how do you think the Saints will adjust their targets and touches? It really seems like they're better suited to deal with an early season Michael Thomas injury with Emmanuel Sanders on this roster than they might have been just a year ago.
Yeah, I think that you might see a little bit more Latavius Murray. That's really what it comes down to. Brandon knows. We talked about it on the rankings show. I think Traequan Smith is intriguing, but I wouldn't be shocked. Look, Deontay Harris being the guy wouldn't shock me. Jared Cook, providing top 5 numbers, hopefully in a situation where we're relying on him, hopefully does it as well. But this is why Drew Brees can be frustrating, is because he's just going to find who's open. It could be anybody. Watch freaking Taysom Hill get in there and involved in a receiving touchdown. But I think that Traequan looks to be the first one up. He had more snaps than Emmanuel Sanders last week. I don't think Emmanuel Sanders is not the number 1. He is. But I think you can see Traequan. I think Latavius Murray might get mixed in more. If you're looking for a deep league running back option, I think Latavius Murray's become startable this week. And real quick, DVR, just so you know, Cortland Sutton's officially going to play, although they said he looks hurt in practice, but he's going to play.
That's not great. He looks hurt in practice. He's going to play through it, which makes me think, he's going to make it worse.
The quote was Willis Reed-like in practice.
Willis Reed-like. That's not
for his
usually
shoulder.
good going into the situation. Yeah. I don't see this ending
Adrenaline's
well.
an amazing thing. We gotta hope for that here.
A lot of Toradol, too, I'm sure, at this point.
Exactly.
Let's talk about Le'Veon Bell. We're talking about deep running backs to consider. The Jets' backfield looks like an absolute wasteland without Le'Veon Bell, Jake. Is there a scenario in which you're playing a Jets running back, especially in a tough matchup against San Francisco?
Dez, throw up the X. No way. No chance. No how. Look, it might be Adams, but he's back and forth between whether or not he's going to be in the practice squad, whether Michael Perine or Perine, whatever. I still don't think we have an official word of how to say his last name. But in any case, if he's out there, then no Adams, and it's Frank Gore hanging on at this point. But Frank Gore, what upside does he have? I'm just staying away. Le'Veon Bell couldn't get anything going with this offense. What makes you think against the 49ers any of the running backs are going to? If one of them finishes as top 20, I'll eat my hat type of situation to happily do it. I don't want him in my lineup. Good luck for you if you do it.
How do you eat a hat? How do you prepare it? Do you deep fry it? Do you
one
bake
bite
it?
at a time?
I think, yeah, one bite at a time. I think you have to cook it like kale just to dry it out and make it like chips or something. We do have our first guest of today's show, so let's bring on Jourdan Rodrigue. She covers the Athletics. She covers the Rams for the Athletic. They've got a great matchup today against the Eagles. Jourdan, welcome to the show. I want to start with this backfield situation. Is this really Malcolm Brown's job to lose? 110 yards from scrimmage, 2 touchdowns in week 1. It really took the fantasy world by surprise because most of us were going after Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson as the primary 2 backs in Sean McVay's offense.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily Malcolm Brown's job to lose. He just was the hot hand. And he also, I think, coming into the game, hinted a little bit about how the running back by committee situation might drive fantasy football people a little bit crazy because they're very much going running back by committee, and they're also going who's got the hot hand, who's working against whatever defensive scheme that we're going up against. And they were really able to pull really well for him, and he was able to get some hard downhill running going, which very much helped them last week against Dallas. And so they stuck with him, and, you know, he was the first touchdown in SoFi Stadium and the second one too. So, I don't think that it's necessarily his job. I don't think that it's his job to lose either. I think you at this point with them, you're going to have to look at matchups and see where Darrell Henderson, Cam Akers are going to start to shine. I stick by what I think, which is that Cam Akers will finish the season with the most touches. But Malcolm Brown was the hot hand for them last week, and so they just kind of stuck with him.
It seems like for a lot of the rookies in week 1, they just looked like they were a little bit behind, and it makes sense league-wide, of course, with the unusual shape of the ramp-up to this season. Let's talk about Tyler Higbee for a moment. He was relatively quiet against the Cowboys, and I think people were looking at him as a possible tight end 1 in fantasy, coming off of the stretch run he had at the end of 2019. Is what we saw for him target-wise in week 1 an aberration, or are we going to see inconsistent usage from Higbee on a week-to-week basis?
To be honest with you guys, and I think this pretty much is standard throughout the league, I don't think that you saw even like a portion of what the Rams offense is going to look like later throughout the season. I think a lot of people are playing that game right now where they're either showing what they want defenses to be scared of in the case of New England and Cam Newton running the football, or they're hiding what they don't want offenses to scheme for. And in this case, a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of tight end work from the Rams. I still think Tyler Higbee is going to have a fantastic season. He's pushing to try to be the third 1,000-yard receiver for Jared Goff. Jared Goff came out and said he wanted 3 at the beginning of this year, and we kind of already plugged in Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods into those first 2 spots. So I would very much expect Tyler Higbee to get some more usage and increased usage as the season goes on. Again, though, like after week 1 with no off season or preseason, I really don't think that we're seeing pretty much any of what the Rams really want to be doing with their offense moving forward.
Yeah, as we think about the ways the Rams can mix and match personnel and really spread targets around in different ways each week, is it fair for people to expect Cooper Kupp to approach 10 targets per game? Is it safe to assume that he's kind of the true number 1 in that group of pass catchers, even if everybody else behind him fluctuates a bit more on a week-to-week basis?
Yeah, again, like I hesitate away from calling someone a number 1 in this offense just because they do rotate these guys so often. And if you're going to go with, seniority and number of touches and starters, then you'd probably say Robert Woods is the number one. But if you go week over week over week over week in terms of who's getting the most consistent number of touches, I think Cooper Kupp, sure. I would say that it's fine to average him 10 touches a game. But again, and I know this probably drives people who are listening to fantasy football advice. I know this probably drives you crazy, but I don't know what to tell you. Like Sean McVay, he has 2 number 1 receivers. He thinks he has at least 2 number 1 running backs. So, distribution of touches. This is a team where you're going to have to really, really pay attention to matchup. And so on days where they really want to work underneath, Cooper Kupp is your number 1 receiver. On days where they'd like to stretch a little bit and they'd like to do a little more versatile things, Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods are going to have pretty much the same target allocation. And then on days where they need to really, kind of work in different matchups, Tyler Higbee could be the number 1 receiver. So while I do think it's fair to average Cooper Kupp overall through the course of the season, about 10 per game, I definitely stay away from those number 1 labels, because you could get more production from Robert Woods one day and then be bummed that you started Cooper Kupp, and then the next week Cooper Kupp could be your guy after you started Robert Woods. So, I'm sorry, because I know it drives fantasy football people crazy, but that's just kind of how it's going to be with these guys moving forward.
And just thinking about the group of players we're talking about, the rookie Van Jefferson didn't really get a mention there. I think if everybody's healthy, he might just be the odd man out for now. Do you think we have to wait for an injury for Jefferson to get more of an opportunity when you think about, Woods signing an extension, the big investment in Kupp, Higbee's role, you have a couple backs that can catch passes? Is the Van Jefferson breakout really more of a 2021 thing than a possible rookie year sort of thing?
No, I don't think so. Again, it just kind of goes back to what is the matchup that they're facing. Like this week, for example, against Philadelphia, I think you could see Van Jefferson get a few more touches. They're trying to work him in consistently into the rotation. And honestly, I think you definitely will see him get more touches than Josh Reynolds by the time it's all said and done. And kind of he'll kind of overlap him as the season progresses. But with Van Jefferson, they really want to get as many touches to him as possible, because even as a rookie, he's just a special player. So no, I don't think his target allocation is going to come close to Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp's, but I think he'll be in the mix against a Tyler Higbee type, for example. And I've kind of been beating the drum on this for the entire, training camp, what little we got to see of it, because Van Jefferson showed up on day 1 and looked really special. So it just depends on whether scheming more tight end work is more advantageous for the Rams, or scheming those 3 receiver sets is more advantageous for the Rams week to week. And I think at that point, you're going to see less of a less of a Van Jefferson competing with for the number 3 receiver spot. And instead, let's call it a number 3 pass catching spot, because he'll very much be competing with Tyler Higbee for some of those touches.
Definitely sounds like a bit of a nightmare for fantasy owners to sort out each and every week. Last question for you. It's okay. It's not your fault. You didn't build that team. Last question for you, Jourdan. Who's the unheralded worker that the coaching staff loves on this team? If you've had a chance to watch them in the little bit of camp there was and through the first week of the season, basically, in the words of our producer, Nando DeFino, who is this team's Reggie Bonifant?
Oh, Nando got me on that one. I love that. Reggie was like our guy last year when I was covering the Panthers, and he ended up breaking out a little bit. But, the unheralded worker, I do think, is Malcolm Brown, and he got a little of his flowers last week. Malcolm Brown is like the number 1 guy in these staff's hearts in terms of who's going to come out there, show up, do his job, do it to the best of his ability, and then try to take others along and bring others along up with him. In terms of Malcolm Brown's really, really charged with coaching up that running backs room. And as you start to see Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson succeed and get more touches throughout the rest of the season, Malcolm Brown is definitely the pulse and the heartbeat of that room, and a big reason why those guys will be successful.
Thanks a lot for the time this morning, Jourdan. Enjoy week 2.
Thanks, guys.
That's Jourdan Rodrigue. She covers the Rams for The Athletic. You can get all of her coverage, all of our written fantasy football content, including Jake's rankings at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. Sign up for just $1 a month. And be sure to check out Jourdan's podcast, 11 Personnel with Rich Hammond. It's focused on the Rams each and every week. Let's bring back Jake and Brandon and take a few questions from our viewers. This first one comes from Irvin. It's a full PPR league. Choose 2 out of Keenan Allen, Terry McLaurin, John Brown, and Robbie Anderson. What do you think here, Jake?
Check the link. No, I'm just kidding. First 2, Allen and McLaurin. And I'll let Brandon add context because I think he agrees.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm interested in John Brown in that matchup against Miami. Had a good first week, but he's not 100% healthy. And in the case of Robbie Anderson, also a good first week, but the matchup kind of excludes him as well. So I'm with Jake. I'll go with the first 2.
Next question here comes from TS. Deontay Johnson or CeeDee Lamb in a PPR league? Let's go to you, Brandon.
Yeah, I think it's CeeDee Lamb. He had a very nice week 1. It's close, but I just love this matchup against Atlanta. And you saw Tyler Lockett have 90-plus yards in the slot. He was open a lot, and with no Blake Jarwin, I can see CeeDee Lamb getting a lot of those. I mean, we saw him those kind of intermediate crosses, and they look great with Dak Prescott. I can see that continuing to roll.
Heard a little bit of a surprise sound from Jake as he gave that answer. What do you think here, Jake?
It just comes down to I'll take the number 2 over the number 3 on a team. I don't disagree with anything that Brandon said, and I love CeeDee Lamb as a player, but when you're the number 2, even against Denver, who's kind of banged up right now, as much as their run defense looked good in week 1, I'll take the number 2 over the number 3 on a team every single time just for the fact of I know who's going to be more involved or should be more involved.
We got one more question here from Dan in a full PPR league. DJ Chark or Emmanuel Sanders, Jake?
Floor is with Sanders, but I'm still going to go with my boy Chark. Because it's a full PPR, this is what Chark does. Like last week, everybody was upset that he saved his day with a touchdown. That's DJ Chark. Like, he's a wide receiver 1 who saved his day with a touchdown. He could go out and have 5 for 70. He could go out and have 7 for 100. He could go last week, 2 catches and a touchdown. But if you want the floor, it's with Sanders, only because it's a full PPR. But I'm still going with Chark.
Do you agree with that one, Jake? Or Brandon?
Brandon.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree that this could be a week when the Saints, who have evolved into a running team, they've changed that emphasis so much in the last couple of years. I agree that, I mean, they could just go all day with Latavius Murray and Alvin Kamara and just dinking and dunking and have a lot of success still against this Carolina defense. I mean, we saw Josh Jacobs run all over them, and I'm guessing that the Saints are going to probably try to attack them first and foremost that way.
Vegas, by the way, real quick. I know you meant Vegas defense.
That's going to take a long time to get used to.
Really? Well, no, he said Carolina. He was like a whole different state.
Yeah. Sorry.
Let's get back to some news here in just a minute. Quick heads up, the Jock Market IPOs for week 2 are up, so be sure to get the Jock Market app on your phone ASAP. Start making money here in week 2.
Buy some Scotty Miller before it's too late.
Yeah, buy in. I mean, look, I think part of that is just going after Jake's rankings, finding players that are outside the top 10 at a position that you think should be in the top 10, investing there, watching those guys go off and making some money. We talked about
and then tell me I'm
Le'Veon Bell.
Stupid.
Yeah, and then comment in Jake's articles and tell him he's stupid. That's exactly how it's done. Let's talk about Jamison Crowder for a minute. We talked about Le'Veon Bell a few minutes ago. The backfield's a mess. Jamison Crowder was the one viable pass catcher in this offense in week 1. And Brandon, it looks like he's going to avoid an IR stint, but Crowder was the beast in this offense. 7 for 115 and a score on 13 targets. Is this group of pass catchers as much of a mess now without Crowder as the backfield is without Le'Veon Bell?
Well, look, against a different opponent, like you could say, oh yeah, Breshad Perriman has some big play upside, and Chris Herndon, is going to get some nice volume. But I'm just so worried about the pressure that the 49ers will put on Sam Darnold, who, he's not Kyler Murray. He's not going to be able to take off and rush for 90 yards when the heat starts coming. He's going to start seeing ghosts. We know that, and I think there's going to be a lot of ghosts in the stadium this week. I'm really going to be shocked if the Jets put up more than 10, 13 points total in this one. So I just want to stay away from this Jets offense as much as possible this week. And if there's no Crowder going forward and the opponent's a little bit kinder, then maybe you this is just a really good watch and see week on anybody else outside of Crowder.
Yeah, I really want to just avoid the Jets offense entirely, especially given the difficulty of this matchup here in week 2. Let's talk about A.J. Brown. He is officially out for today's game against Jacksonville. Let's talk about the trust level with Corey Davis. Jake, our friend Michael Beller suggesting that Davis could be this year's Devontae Parker. Are you willing to buy that narrative coming off of Davis's surprisingly productive week one?
Did Nando write this? Is this what this is? This like a troll job here? Nando knows 100% that Beller agreed with me when I said Corey Davis was this year's Devontae Parker back in like March. So bite me, Nando. In any case, the trust level doesn't have to do with Corey Davis. It honestly has to do with this offense. The same concerns we had for A.J. Brown this year is the fact that it's Tannehill, that's a low passing volume, Derrick Henry. Like, honestly, I love Derrick. I consider putting Derrick Henry as my number one running back this week. Also because Corey Davis, for the trust level, he's dealing with a hamstring injury. Like, this has been the issue with Corey Davis getting off on the right foot in the NFL. Is not just the fact he hasn't been productive, but he's been hurt every single year, and he's less than 100%. Like, you assume the volume should be, but you know, as I kind of jokingly said to Brandon, like his Jono thing is going to pay off, not because necessarily like 100% right. I'm not taking away from you, Brandon, but A.J. Brown being hurt, Corey Davis being hurt, like I might feel better about Jono than I do about Corey Davis this week.
I think that's fair. I mean, I think Jono's going to be heavily involved. There's room for both, of course, given the circumstances. Brandon, what are your thoughts on Corey Davis, and is there anybody else that you like with Brown out?
Well, I mean, Adam Humphries is maybe the consolation for those that wanted to go out and pick up Scotty Miller with Chris Godwin being gone, right? I mean, Adam Humphries had 7 targets last week. I mean, he's not a high upside guy, but if you're in a PPR league, can you get another
7 for 55 incoming?
Yeah, you'll take it though, right? In a PPR league, you'll take 7 for 55. That absolutely plays, and that's right. I think that's on the table for Adam Humphries. I'm not going to give you a Khalif Raymond, but I think it's, you know, if you're going to dive into anybody in the passing game outside of Corey Davis, I think it's got to be Humphries and Jonnu Smith.
Let's move on to Denver. We just got some news that Courtland Sutton is officially active. How effective he's going to be is a question that we'll get to here in just a moment. The other big news, though, with the Broncos going to this matchup is that Phillip Lindsay is not going to play. I saw a report scroll by just before we came on to begin the show. Phillip Lindsay could miss 2 to 4 weeks with turf toe, according to NFL Network's Ian Rappaport. So, Brandon, let's start with the running back situation. How much does Melvin Gordon move up your big board in Phillip Lindsay's absence?
Yeah, he moved up about 5 spots. I was ranking him in the low 20s at the running back position, and then in my big board this week, I think I ranked him 17th or 18th at running back overall. That, you know, we'll see. If it's 4 weeks out for Lindsay, then maybe I'm a little bit too low. But I thought Gordon looked really good against the Titans. I didn't think he had any cheap yards. I think he earned them all, and you know, this has been a pretty good run blocking unit for Denver. So it's a tough matchup this week, but and so I'm not ranking him quite so high for this week in particular. But I think Melvin Gordon looked good in his first showing as a Bronco. I expect him to, you know, kind of be the guy that we've seen in the past. So, you know, thumbs up on him.
Jake, a quick related question here. Is there any reason to believe that Royce Freeman will have a meaningful complementary role in this backfield, or is it entirely Gordon's at this point?
No, I think we'll see a complimentary role. Whether or not it's meaningful is the question. And if you go back to Royce Freeman last year, we were all confused as we saw Freeman getting the passing game work and Lindsay getting the runs inside the 5-yard line. So if you're kind of going back to last year, and what the reports were to start this year is that Lindsay was going to be involved 50% of the time with Melvin Gordon, more in the passing game role this year than he was last year. I think you have to assume they're going to use Freeman some. It's not going to be the 45%, but this is a deep league, kind of you're desperate at running back, and a lot of people who play like 16-team leagues might be.
As far as this group of pass catchers go, Sutton being active, okay, so he's available. Do you really want to use him? I mean, Jake, does Sutton even crack your top 30 among receivers, given the uncertainty about how healthy he really is?
I'd say he falls into it. Like, I'd be more comfortable. We talked about Mike Williams earlier. I would start Mike Williams despite dealing with Keenan Allen. Like, who's it going to be any single week? And Hunter Henry looked good in week 1. Like, that kind of safety, I would play. Like, unless you happen to face Nick Chubb and Tyler Boyd on Thursday night, and then you're just going for the home run. That's the only situation I would probably risk Sutton this week.
Do you agree with that, Brandon? Because it seems to me like the problem with Courtland Sutton is that even if he's getting his usual share of targets, he might not be able to pull in as many of them given the nature of that shoulder injury.
Mike Evans, week 1.
Yeah, it's risky for sure. You mentioned Toradol or whatever. I've heard that this is a kind of injury that if you are willing to take that shot, that you can go out there on a Sunday and feel just fine. So apparently, though, it looks like he's showing his injury, so maybe he's not feeling that right now. Maybe he didn't want to take the shot. He's just going to gut through the pain, in which case I'm not as excited. I mean, when I heard that he's showing himself in a Willis Reed kind of fashion out there on the field, that had me, not quite as excited, because we saw, a similar vertical, big-bodied receiver in Darius Slayton go for a nice day against these Steelers, and so you can kind of make that leap to Sutton being a similar styled receiver, but I'm not gonna fully embrace that at this point.
Yeah, I just think that Denver offense is going to have its hands full going up against Pittsburgh today. Let's talk about the Eagles' backfield. Miles Sanders is back. Is he coming into a good situation in his return, Jake? What are your greatest concerns with Sanders after he missed last week's opener with that hamstring injury?
It's the offensive line, but Lane Johnson's supposed to be back too, so I feel great. If you drafted Miles Sanders, you drafted him in the first or second round, it was right in that area. I can't see how you bench him in his first game back, even though it's his first game back. Miles Sanders, all the reports are he looks as good as he ever was out there before, and he would potentially able to play last week. So this feels like one of the situations where we should feel good about it because they were safe with him. I'm firing up. I think he's a borderline RB1.
Do you think he's a firm top 10 back as well, Brandon?
Yeah, when Jake says RB1, I look at it as top 12, and I think Jake does too, and he's a borderline. That's kind of where I have him ranked. I don't have him ranked in the top 10, but to Jake's point, if you drafted Miles Sanders, I don't have him buried so far in the rankings that you are likely to have a couple other running backs that are better plays in my mind. So, yeah, I'm firing him up. I think he's also a borderline RB1 this week. I think I have him ranked 15th, but again, if you own Miles Sanders – and I have him ranked 15th, it's very unlikely you have a bunch of running backs ranked higher than him that you can throw into your lineup. So I would say the Sanders owners or GMs, put him in there.
Yeah, safely ranked in a place where he's going to be in your lineups here in week 2. Let's move on to the Colts backfield. Brandon, how do you see the workload being divvied up between Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines in the wake of Marlon Mack's season-ending injury?
Yeah, I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be the guy that's, like Marlon Mack in past seasons, who's pushing 20 carries week in and week out, and there's a little bit higher ceiling now in the passing game. We saw him get 6 catches, which in week 1, which was a bit of an eye-opener, but not necessarily if you know Phillip Rivers, who completed or threw to the running back 17 times in week 1. No other team threw to their running backs even 10 times. So it shows you what Phillip Rivers likes to do, and Marlon Mack's out of the equation. It's just, in my mind, this is probably low 20 touches week in and week out for Jonathan Taylor, and mid-teen touches for Nyheim Hines. And Jonathan Taylor is right in that RB1 conversation. I think Nyheim Hines will be right in that RB2, back-end RB2 conversation. So I do think we will see a little bit of Jordan Wilkins, but not enough to, make any kind of dent in these two's workload. So it looks good for both of these guys going forward.
The situation looked so messy when Mack was healthy. Very unfortunate injury. And, Jake, you've got Taylor 10th among running backs this week in your weekly rankings. Can you just look into the camera and give us your best on Wisconsin? On a more serious note, though, Nyheim Hines isn't exactly buried at 24th in your rankings. Phillip Rivers looked very old last week. So could we see just a more run-heavy philosophy from the Colts than we previously expected, given Rivers kind of showing his age?
We could. Also, by the way, I would love to go to Wisconsin just for the fourth quarter jump around. That's on my bucket list. So, and one of these days, maybe I'll meet you up there, DVR. Look, the Nyheim Hines situation we talked about before is that he's not going to go away. Brandon brought up the stat about Phillip Rivers. I did an off-season piece about where quarterbacks target, and only Nick Foles targeted more of a percentage to the running backs, and that wasn't a full season. So Phillip Rivers is going to continue to throw back there. They're both usable. Jonathan Taylor stepping into a role where you got paid off if you took him because of the injury. So this is just great. It's all full steam ahead for both of them. And the Vikings defense in week 1, a lot of changes, a lot of scheme changes. I'm not ready to say like they're done for people that did draft them like fantasy-wise to say that part of it. But I think that there shouldn't be much of a problem for Taylor and Hines with how bad the Vikings defense looked in week 1.
Yeah, they looked atrocious against the Packers. Aaron Rodgers played well, but there was no resistance. There was very little pressure with the pass rush, too. That was the thing that really caught me off guard with Minnesota. Usually they at least get some pressure. Let's get to a few questions here before we move on to our next segment. What do we got lined up here? We got a question from J. Dye. Sutton, Traequan Smith, or Brandon Ayuk in a half PPR league? We'll start with you, Brandon.
Yeah, this is the situation where I would go Cortland Sutton. I don't know where Jake's going to go, but Ayuk wasn't healthy. This will be his first game. So many rookies in their first game last week looked tentative, looked like their heads were swimming a little bit, and so you worry a little bit about that. Traequan Smith, I have absolutely no faith, and if I'm going with Traequan Smith stepping up or Cortland Sutton being able to overcome, his shoulder injury and stuff, I'm gonna go with Cortland Sutton every time.
Yeah, I was laughing at the picture. I didn't know if that was supposed to be like Cortland Sutton's leg, and that's why he's wrapped up like that. I you know what? As much as I actually do have faith in Traequan Smith to a degree, this is still one of the ones. Like, what do you expect for Traequan Smith? It's a dice roll. You hope he scores a touchdown and has a big day. What do you hope for Cortland Sutton? Same thing. Who's the better receiver? Cortland Sutton. And I'll go with Cortland Sutton in this situation.
Yeah, those were pretty rough options with very low target floors. I think that was the key for me as well. Phil wants to know, am I crazy to be starting Scotty Miller over DJ Moore today? I think I know where you're going with this one, Jake.
Yes, but no, I will say this. It's your team. So technically, no, you're not. Like, the rankings aren't 100%, even the best of the best, and I'll include myself in that list. 65, 70% of the time we're correct. We're predicting sports. I always tell everybody, this is one of the first column intros I do every single year, is that trust your gut. Your gut tells you for a reason. Maybe it's something you remember. Maybe it's something subconsciously you remember, but you can't put your finger on, and it's just in the back of your mind. Like, I'm not doing it. I'm not sitting DJ Moore, but it might work out. If you really want to do it, it's a borderline crazy move, but it's your team. Go with who you want.
It's true. You got to make your own decisions. Let's go to DJ IMD1. Flex PPR League, Drake or Jonathan Taylor? What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, I'm going Jonathan Taylor all the way on this one. And what we saw from that Washington front last week is they're formidable. But really, even in a good matchup, I think I'm in on Jonathan Taylor just because I think, the overall volume should be in his favor most weeks. There's high efficiency in that Arizona backfield, but they just don't typically get the volume that you would get in this Colts backfield. So, and especially with Jonathan Taylor sort of being unlocked in the passing game as well, it's going to lead me to Taylor more often than not.
Agreement there, Jake?
Yep, 100%. I was already concerned about Drake, and they're using Chase Edmonds a good amount, and now it's Taylor's backfield.
All right, send those questions in. We'll get to more of those throughout the show. You continue to see the inactive scrolling by on the bottom. I think it's a maxed out ticker at this point in week 2, which makes me worry a little bit about the end of the season and the number of injured players we'll be talking about at that time. Our friends at Manscaped partner with us to make sure you don't gamble on shaving the same way you might like to gamble on football. Manscaped is the only men's brand dedicated to below-the-waist grooming. And the Lawnmower 3.0 is a waterproof cordless body trimmer that makes it safe and easy. Subscribe to the Perfect Package and get a new replacement blade refill for your trimmer delivered to your door every 3 months, making sure your trimmer always stays fresh and clean. Get 20% off and free shipping when you go to manscaped.com/theathletic. That's 20% off with free shipping when you go to manscaped.com/theathletic. It's time to boost your hygiene with the absolute best with Manscaped. All right, guys, let's get to our Who Do I Start segment, which leads us to a lot of interesting toss-ups. Let's begin with our favorite receiver on this show. Yes, we're going to talk about Quintez Cephus again. Our producer, Nano Defino, putting this one up on a tee for me. Quintez Cephus versus Antonio Gibson, two guys who debuted in week 1. With Gibson, the touches weren't quite where we expected, but Peyton Barber was very inefficient. So if you're looking at these two guys in a flex situation, where do you want to go, Jake?
Oh, look at the size difference. You got to go with Antonio Gibson. I'm going to go with Gibson. Look, I'm not trying to play the fence or straddle the fence here, but the truth is, if you need guaranteed production, you take Gibson. If you need the upside, you go with Cephus, because I do think Gibson's still going to take a little bit longer to get involved where we see 15 touches in a week, let alone maybe a dozen. I think he's going to work up to that. Just don't know it's there yet. So if you want those 8 to 10 and that guaranteed production, that's fine. He's a running back. Cephus could get 10 targets, only catch 2. So that's really what it comes down to. Week 1, he had a lot of opportunities and didn't really hit on all of them.
I do think with Cephus, though, you're going to get a lot of matchups against third and fourth corners, which makes things a lot more interesting for him. I think he can win in a lot of those spots. What do you think about Gibson, Brandon? Do you agree it's going to take a few more weeks before he's fully up to speed in this offense?
Yeah, I think they will love to expedite that, I think, because Peyton Barber was on brand with his 17 carries for 29 yards. Yeah, he got into the end zone and did, that's kind of what Peyton Barber does. He's sort of, in my mind, he's kind of like the middle class or poor man's version of Malcolm Brown. But I think they know that Antonio Gibson is the guy that's going to be able to make plays for them eventually. And the quicker they can get him up to speed, the better for this offense in general. So I expect there to be a concerted effort each week to get him a little bit further along. I think, to Jake's point, I think he's pretty safe right now for 10 to 12 touches, and it might be a few weeks before we start seeing 15, 16. But for this week, you feel good about at least a double digit workload, and that for me is going to typically lean me his way over Cephus.
Now we've got more of a philosophical question with the next one. In a PPR scenario, if you're looking at Melvin Gordon versus any one of these slot receivers we've been talking about, or even a guy like Danny Amendola, a guy who's going to get more because the top receiver is out, how much could you even raise a player like Amendola? Can he ever get on the same level as a guy that's going to have an RB1 sort of workload like Gordon will with Phillip Lindsay out of the picture? I mean, what do you think here, Brandon?
Yeah, there's going to be very rarely a time when I'm going to start a Danny Amendola over someone like Melvin Gordon, where I feel like Gordon's going to have a really good shot for 20 catches or 20 touches, and in Gordon's case, he's going to catch some passes too. And what's Danny Amendola? What are you hoping for? 6 catches, 70 yards at his best. And I think Melvin Gordon's probably got 70 yards as a pretty easy base total yards, and then you're going to get a few catches. I mean, he's just a lot safer. The floor is so much higher with a guy like that. So yeah, it's going to be Gordon for me every time.
Same for you, Jake?
Yeah, that's not even close, not even discussion. Even if Gordon was dealing with Lindsay, I wouldn't even include this as a discussion.
Yeah, I just think the slot receivers in general are really hard to elevate, even in full PPR leagues, unless the tree is so thinned out that you expect them to get a lot more work than usual. I think Amendola will be busier than usual without Golladay, but the Lions have plenty of other options to target there as well.
Like if this was healthy Lindsay versus Amendola, then we would have a discussion.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Let's move on to Frank Gore or Nyheim Hines taking away the PPR element. How much does that hurt Nyheim Hines if you're not getting even a half point per reception? Gore versus Hines, Jake, where do you go?
Nyheim Hines. I don't care what format this is. Like points per carry is still Nyheim Hines. Maybe Frank Gore starts to push him in that one.
Yeah, and you could say, oh, well, look at Nyheim Hines scored a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown last week. And, he had 73 yards. Like Frank Gore at his best is going to maybe get you 73 yards at this point, So, and we're looking at Nyheim Hines saying, this is kind of the role that we saw in week 1 that you can imagine that's going to be a consistent role for him going forward. So, again, this is a runaway in Hines' favor in my mind.
Interesting note there on the screen from Vicky, Tremont Williams not being there with the Packers. That gives Danny Amendola maybe a little more opportunity working out of the slot today in that matchup against Green Bay. Let's go to our next one, Scotty Miller or Mark Ingram in a half-point PPR league. A lot of Scotty Miller talk on this show. Mark Ingram, a little bit of a disappointment in week 1, to put it very kindly. What do you think here, Brandon? Do you go back to the well with Ingram even though he let us down last week?
Yeah, well, we heard the offensive coordinator say this could be a week-to-week thing with the running backs. I wouldn't be surprised if they want to get Mark Ingram a little something this week as well. And look at Cleveland is looking like kind of a tough run defense. They shut down Joe Mixon. They shut down the Ravens on the ground last week. But you also look at Baltimore was so efficient last week passing the ball that they ran the ball about 7-8 times less than they would normally do compared with last year. And so I expect the volume to be better this week for those running backs. And even though Dobbins got a couple touchdowns last week, was used down there, it does not mean that's his role. And it could just very easily be Ingram's. This was a team that led the NFL in red zone trips last year. So I think there's always going to be good opportunities for these Ravens running backs to score. And for that reason, I'm going to still lean Mark Ingram.
What say you, Jake?
With when it's this close, and I do this one actually is this close, and I'm not going to go back to earlier with what I said. The safer option is Mark Ingram because that's obvious at this point. If it's me personally, I would just roll the dice with Scotty Miller. I'm too worried about what this backfield is. Like, what if it's the same thing again? What if J.K. Dobbins is just going to take over now instead of later? Because like this is a shock to everybody. And I'm not saying it's definitively going to happen, but until you see it play out for a second week, I'm trying actively to avoid Mark Ingram.
I'm trying not to panic in the places where I've got him. I believe he still should have a role because he's good enough to have a role, but maybe they just don't need him. Maybe they've got enough at running back with the depth even behind J.K. Dobbins to move on from Ingram, maybe trade him away. I don't think they're going to do that. I think we're going to instead, as fantasy owners, be left in this really difficult decision spot every single week as long as everybody is going to stay healthy. We're going to say goodbye to Jake. Jake, any last thoughts here before we send you away to update the rankings for week 2?
Yeah, go check the link. I'll say one. For everybody asking on Twitter and stuff like that Tyron Smith is out for the Cowboys. Does it worry me about Zeke? How far are you going to go? It doesn't matter if Zeke is RB2, RB10, RB50. You're starting Zeke. Shut the hell up. There's my final comment.
Such a kind way to go. If you do want to check the link, you can do that. Get the subscription to The Athletic for $1 a month at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. That includes Jake's rankings. That includes all of our written stuff. You want to get ahead on the week 3 waiver wire. We've got a piece up from Dave Ganos about that as well. You get Brandon's big board, plus get all the team coverage, league-wide coverage, other sports as well. Theathletic.com/cheat sheet. Sign up for just $1 a month. Let's bring on our next guest. Ed Melian joins us for week 2's Brit's Picks. What's going on today, Ed?
How are we doing, guys? Yeah, pretty good. I'm glad I'm not on with Jake because I'm about to pick his rankings apart. So it's a wonderful Sunday.
I love it. I want to ask you, we're going to go position by position for some guys that you like more than Jake. That's basically the feel of what we're looking for. Where is
Absolutely.
Jake wrong? It's great that he's not here to defend himself anymore either. Let's begin at the quarterback position. What did Jake screw up at quarterback this week, Ed?
Well, Bears v. Giants might sound like something out of Harry Potter, but I'm not expecting much magic today between two of the worst teams in the NFL. That said, QB5 in week 1, Mitchell Trubisky. And he's playing against the defense that's going to struggle to stop the pass all year. They had Sam Beal opt out, DeAndre Baker. Less said about that, the better. But despite Daniel Jones showing some signs of growth against the Steelers on Monday night, the Giants-Bears could be a bit of a shootout between two pretty dreadful teams. Nagy's going to scheme this one up nicely. As I said, I don't think there's going to be too much resistance from this Giants defense. And I think Mitch, as I say, QB5 last week, 30 points on the board from him. I like the game script and how this might go for Mitch. I like the fact that you got Tariq Cohen, Aaron Robinson. So even if he doesn't get the ball out deep, he can get people who've got run after the catch ability. Darnell Mooney might feature a lot today as well. That's a name to watch. So I just like that. Jake Seeley has him ranked at QB 21, and I think that this is potentially a top 12 performance from Mitch today.
Yeah, I should note when we were discussing some guys you were going to talk about, you did send the nauseated emoji with it. No one ever feels good backing Mitchell Trubisky, but the situation for the second straight week is a good one. So I'm with you. I think he's actually very stackable. Ken chimes in. The next time Matt Nagy schemes up anything nicely will be the first time. I think that's a little critical. I don't think Mitchell Trubisky is actually an above-average NFL quarterback. I don't think Matt Nagy's exactly had good quarterback play to work with during his time in Chicago. But like Ed, I do like him this week. What do you think about running back? We were just talking about the Ravens situation. Is Jake too low on J.K. Dobbins?
Yeah, for me, far too low. He's RB26 in Jake's rankings. I bet the Ravens at virtually every points handicap that I could. I think they'll trample all over this Texans defense, which, with apologies to Justin Reed, is essentially J.J. Watt and 10 stiffs. Baltimore's running game, one of the most intricately designed in the whole league. They're going to stretch that defense out. They're going to find the ways to run the ball away from J.J. Watt, put up points, and then they're going to grind them down with that three-headed rushing attack. Now, we don't know how three-headed it is now because Ingram didn't see too much work in that first week. I think J.K. Dobbins can do everything. He can run, he can catch. Lamar can obviously run and can throw. But Dobbins is the guy. I think he's an RB2, maybe even a borderline RB1 for the rest of the season already. And I think he's definitely going to outperform Jake's ranking of RB26 this week. In the same game, by the way, with Duke Johnson out, I do like David Johnson this week to finish as a top 10 back as well. I think he's going to get a ton of work. And I also think that the Ravens will back off, try and stop those deep shots from Deshaun Watson. And that might mean that David Johnson can eat underneath.
Yeah, good efficient day for David Johnson, potentially with increased volume without Duke Johnson in the fold. Ed, I think you probably approach receivers the way I do. If I'm looking a little bit down the list for some value, I'm looking for a team playing catch-up or maybe an overlooked shootout, and we certainly have that with the Chargers going up against the Chiefs this week. Who do you really like who's a bit down ballot this week at wide receiver?
Well, I mean, I'll say this first. I'm completely out on the Chargers this year. I thought there was a chance they could be potentially an elite defensive unit with Derwin James in there, and maybe Tyrod or Justin Herbert could game manage them to the playoffs effectively. But when Derwin James went down, there's a few other injuries. Anthony Lynn makes a lot of mistakes as a head coach in terms of managing the clock and things like that. The Chiefs will beat them by a few touchdowns today. I think that's pretty sure. But that does mean a game script that's going to favor Mike Williams. Tyrod did sling it towards Williams a few times. Williams went into last week supposedly a little bit injured, but if you watch the game, there are a few circus catches he pulled off. There are another couple that kind of went out of bounds or ended up incomplete, but the air yards were there. I think he was top 5 in air yards last week. And Mike Williams has looked every bit the kind of first-round wide receiver when he's had the opportunity. So I think that with the Chiefs probably going to be 20 points ahead, Tyrod and potentially even, we might see Herbert at the end if this game's a blowout. I think they're going to be slinging it up to Mike Williams. Mike Williams can make some big catches, and he's WR33 for Jake today. I'd have him a little higher than that. I think there's some garbage time potential there, and we all love garbage time.
Now let's dig a little bit deep. We've got news scrolling across the bottom, of course, some players who are out today. George Kittle, a pretty big blow for anybody who drafted him early or paid top dollar in an auction. And if you have Kittle, you probably don't have a backup tight end on your roster. Where would you go if you're looking in a deeper league for someone who's kind of unheralded at tight end that could pop up and have a nice game this week?
As ever with The Athletic, it's always the deeply personal stories. I drafted George Kittle this year, so I'm without him today. I managed to pick up Jonnu Smith off the waiver wire. If you can pick up Jonnu Smith on waivers, please go and get him now. Obviously, there's no A.J. Brown. Adam Humphries might get some work, but I think Jonnu Smith is also one of the best kind of after-the-catch tight end receivers in the entire league. So, Jake, go away. But I do like Mo Alley Cox. He's ranked tight end 22 this week. Jack Doyle is out for the Colts. Phillip Rivers always loves a big target as his tight end. I think there's a chance for some end zone touches for Mo Alley Cox. We saw him score a few touchdowns last year, and I think this week in particular against the Vikings defense that I'm not a huge fan of, I think he could be more in the top 10 range for the tight ends.
Yeah, that Minnesota defense looked atrocious in week 1 against the Packers. I mentioned it a bit earlier. Aaron Rodgers played well, but Minnesota's defense kind of helped the Green Bay offense along in that matchup. Ed, great stuff as always. Good luck to you in week 2. Look forward to talking to you again next Sunday.
Cheers, guys. Good to see you.
It's Ed Mallion bringing us Brit's picks each and every week right here on the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet. Let's bring on Michael Beller and Brandon Funston since we waved goodbye to Jake before that segment. We're going to talk about Jock Market. So before we start diving into some potential plays this week, I should remind you it's time to download the Jock Market app. Jock Market turns daily fantasy sports into the stock market. IPOs are up now. You can start making money today. Get the app right now. Android coming soon. Gentlemen, let's begin with Deshaun Watson going up against the Ravens. It is a tough matchup in terms of the Ravens defense being one of the league's better defenses. But Beller, is it possible that Deshaun Watson surprises and maybe brings shootout sort of production to the table this week?
Definitely. We're talking about Deshaun Watson here, even in a game last week against Kansas City where the Chiefs pretty much ran away and hit in that game. You got 253 yards, a touchdown through the air, 27 yards on the ground, and a score with his legs from Deshaun Watson. This is still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. We loved when he had DeAndre Hopkins at his disposal. Obviously no longer the case, but he still is Deshaun Watson, a super talent. This is a game where Baltimore is favored by a touchdown, so there's really no script that can go wrong for Deshaun Watson. If it plays to that script, well, then he's going to be playing catch-up, and we love that. As Ed was just talking about, if it doesn't play to that script, well, Deshaun Watson probably has a huge hand in keeping this game close. Either way, Deshaun Watson is Deshaun Watson, could be one of the more undervalued quarterbacks on the board this week.
Yeah, I think he's borderline matchup-proof, really. I mean, you draft him early enough where you really don't ever want to sit him, but I think he can at least hold his own in this matchup, and I think as long as they've got most of their key weapons healthy, there's not a lot to worry about there. We did wonder kind of coming to the season, how would he adjust to life without DeAndre Hopkins? There are going to be some situations that Houston's offense maybe doesn't convert a third down. They would have converted easily if they still had Hopkins, but they got plenty of big playability as long as Will Fuller in particular is out there. Let's move on to Ezekiel Elliott. This looks like an absolute smash spot for the Dallas offense, Brandon. I mean, Atlanta, maybe it looked like the worst defense in the league in week 1. Do you pay up for Zeke expecting one of his best games of the year in this matchup?
Yeah, I'm ranked as my top-ranked running back, and we heard Jake before he left say, "Don't freak out over Traequan Smith," and being out, and I think that's right. I mean, he's a blindside protector for Dak Prescott, but if I watch Zeke Elliott, and I watch an awful lot of them, they don't just live running the ball over the top of Traequan Smith. And the thing about this game and this offense for Dallas is it's not like Atlanta can just zero in on Ezekiel Elliott. They got 3 great receivers, and they got destroyed in the secondary last week by Russell Wilson. So they're going to have to play this one straight up, and that's going to be trouble having to deal with Ezekiel Elliott as well. So I think the upside remains the same for him, and I expect a huge week from him.
Yeah, I love this Cowboys offense against Atlanta. Who doesn't? But I think you can definitely get a nice ROI on Jock Market with the Cowboys options in that top 70. Let's go to Tyrod Taylor. I think he's a bit more tricky because on paper, they're going to play catch-up. They did not look good in week 1 as an offense. He didn't run the way we expected him to, kind of bumping up that floor. So I was wrong about the week 1 floor. I'm cautiously optimistic that being a big underdog going up against the Chiefs, volume's going to be there. He has most of his weapons healthy as well. Maybe this is an offense that needs a little bit of time to gel with Taylor being new as the starter there. Is it a terrible idea, Beller, to go after Tyrod Taylor expecting maybe his best game of the year today against Kansas City?
Unfortunately, I think it is. I really sold this offense hard. I have a couple of Mike Williams shares in certain spots, and that is it. I have wanted no piece of Austin Eckler. I wanted no piece of Keenan Allen. Those guys were perfect fits with Phillip Rivers' skill set. Phillip Rivers was the guy for those 2 guys. You can make an argument that there were few quarterbacks better for what those guys did. Maybe Drew Brees would have been a better fit, a slightly better fit for Austin Eckler or Keenan Allen, but Phillip Rivers was the ideal quarterback, a guy who got the ball out quick, a guy who has always been very accurate, a guy who is not going to make many things happen with his legs. So when pressure did come, he had to hit one of those guys, a guy who was always good with timing. Perfect for Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen. That is not what Tyrod Taylor does. It just does not feel like the right marriage of quarterback and skill players for the Chargers. I think this is going to be a team that struggles offensively all year. You look at what they did against the Cincinnati offense a week ago, and then you look at what Cleveland did on Thursday night. I think you have to be very concerned about pretty much all of your Chargers shares for the rest of the season. And while I understand the logic behind maybe trying to get behind Tyrod Taylor tonight against the Chiefs, with the fact that Chiefs could easily be playing with a 2-3 score lead for the balance of the game, I just can't get behind it. You still got to have that underlying skill set, and I just don't think that this Chargers offense is going to have it against the Chiefs tonight.
Yeah, fair to question whether or not they even really want to chuck it. One follow-up question for you, Brandon. Austin Eckler's usage as a pass catcher was very surprising in week 1. I mean, the Chargers offense busting, not as much of a surprise overall, but how they busted by not dumping the ball off to Eckler more, that was a surprise. Do you think that was a fluke? Do you think we'll see Eckler get a lot more involved as a pass catcher this week, especially if, as we expect, they are playing from behind so much?
Well, I think I mentioned this on our pod this past week, is that whether it was a fluke or not, I think Anthony Lynn's gone to Tyrod Taylor and said, hey, we need to make sure we get the ball in Austin Eckler's hands in the passing game a lot more. He's one of the best at it in the league. But I think, what's going to happen with this offense is Tyrod Taylor's playing as the Alex Smith role of the ultimate game manager. They're not going to throw the ball a ton, and I think Josh Kelly kind of stepping up last week and showing that he's capable of playing, a nice complement to Eckler in the backfield. I think they're going to lean on Kelly and Eckler as much as humanly possible and just be a very conservative offense, limit Tyrod Taylor's exposure in the passing game as much as they can. But they got to make getting Eckler the ball in the passing game a point of emphasis. I would be shocked if he doesn't catch at least 4 passes this week, if not a lot more.
Let's get to the Tampa Bay passing game. We talked about Mike Evans a bit earlier. With Chris Godwin out, the expectation here is the IPO is going to go through the roof. I mean, if you expect a lot of targets for Evans, he can do a ton of damage with them. Beller, do you trust Mike Evans at an inflated price this week? Do you think he has an easy 10-plus target sort of game with Chris Godwin out of the fold?
Yes, implicitly trust Mike Evans in this spot. I mean, I pretty much implicitly trust Mike Evans no matter what. But with Chris Godwin out, a game where the Buccaneers are still touchdown plus favorites. Depending on where you look, you're going to get them anywhere between 8.5 and 9.5. And while I think that's a little bit inflated, and I do have Carolina as one of my super contest picks here today, I still expect this Buccaneers offense to be able to put some points up on the board, at least get themselves into the mid-20s, if not into the low 30s. And Mike Evans is just going to have, I think, a monster game. Brandon's been the one beating this drum all week that Bruce Arians has said all the right things about Mike Evans. It's my fault we didn't get him double-digit targets. It makes me sick that we didn't get him double-digit targets. We had to be careful about how often we sent him deep because of the hamstring injury that was still troubling him a little bit going into the game last week. All that is off the table here, and you take Chris Godwin out of the picture. There is no question about who the number one receiver is for this team, the number one pass catcher. We like Scotty Miller for good reasons. We know Rob Gronkowski's going to be a threat in the red zone. We'd like to see O.J. Howard getting involved in this pass game the way he did last week, but that is all small potatoes compared with what Mike Evans brings to the table every single time he takes the field. I think we see an easy 12 targets for Mike Evans this week. There is really no IPO price that could be too high, I think, for Mike Evans in this game today. One of the top wide receivers. I think he easily gives you a top 5 receiver score in this game here today.
Brandon, I like Dwayne Haskins pretty much everywhere this week. I like him on Jock Market. I like him anywhere I can get him because I think they're going to have to throw a lot more than they want to. And Arizona, with their up-tempo offense, I think gives Washington a lot of opportunities to sort of max out the number of plays they run as an offense this week. Am I crazy for liking Dwayne Haskins? I think he's going to be nice and cheap today on Jock Market and could return a nice profit.
I'm a little worried, to be honest with you. I'm recommending Arizona as one of the top streaming defenses this week. They put pressure on the quarterback. They have a lot of speed on the defensive and on the back end. Patrick Peterson, Budda Baker, guys that can make plays. You know, in a Jock Market setting as a cheap flyer, yeah, some of what you say makes sense. You're just looking at Dwayne Haskins in general, though. Like, man, I just think overall among the quarterback landscape for this week, I don't see the upside you do, to be honest with you. I think this could be an ugly game for him. Again, I worry about the pressure that Arizona will put on, forcing some throws that could turn into a couple of turnovers. So that's kind of where I'm at with Haskins this week.
What do you think of this Washington offense? Beller had concerns that maybe Terry McLaurin gets slowed down by Patrick Peterson?
Yeah, I mean, that's not the greatest matchup in the world for Terry McLaurin. The great thing for him is that he is so obviously the number one pass catcher in his offense that the target share should always be there for him in a big way. We're going to look up at the end of the season, and he's going to be one of the target share leaders in the NFL without question. So you feel good about him. He's really the only guy in this offense I feel good about. I think Arizona's not getting enough credit for what they did last week, you guys. They go into San Francisco. They beat the 49ers. They actually get down, and they come back in that game and win a 24-20 game against a team that was, half a quarter away from being crowned the Super Bowl champions a season ago. I think this Arizona team is one of the real comers of the 2020 season. We know what they can do offensively. I think they can bring enough defensively, especially if that offense plays to script here this week. And Washington, their front four, their front seven does give me a little bit of pause, but there is a huge, huge difference going up against Carson Wentz like they did last week and being able to contain him and slow him down, and against Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's going to be able to contain quite a bit. And they're going to get some pressure on him. They're going to get their fair share of sacks. But I think Kyler Murray is equipped to counteract that speed in Washington's front four, especially that front four, and then throw Ryan Kerrigan in the mix as well. But I think this game could get ugly for Washington as well. I am backing Arizona on that -7 line. I really think that the Cardinals are going to announce themselves today as one of the big up-and-coming teams of this 2020 season.
More Haskins for me. Glad to be on the opposite side of this one. Curious to see how it plays out. Just as a heads up, last week's top 3 for top ROIs on Jock Market: Calvin Ridley, Devontae Adams, and Adam Thielen. Definitely think about investing in some receivers that might be a little bit low in price. If they come off with a 8-10 catch game, couple of touchdowns, that could be a huge, huge return. Be sure to take control of your fantasy sports experience and download the Jock Market app now in the App Store. Again, the Android app is coming soon. Let's move on to a few questions from our viewers. Emery wants to know, what is your outlook on Carson Wentz this week? Am I better off streaming at quarterback than I am playing Wentz? What say you, Beller?
I mean, in a vacuum, without knowing what the options are, I would say you should feel okay about Carson Wentz. If we're just assuming sort of a flat distribution of quarterback resources across your league, I would say Carson Wentz is going to be better than most of the guys who are available to you in the streaming world. Things got ugly for him in the second half last week, but again, that Washington front four is no joke. And even with Aaron Donald on the Rams front four, I don't think that if you go pound for pound, you can really match up from LA to Washington. So I do think that the Eagles are going to have a little bit better chance of standing up Carson Wentz this week and getting things going. I expect a bigger day out of Jalen Reagor too. Just 4 targets in that game last week. I think that number picks up this week. So I would feel okay about Carson Wentz. Basically a low-end quarterback one for me here in week 2.
Let's go to the next question from Kai. James Conner, Benny Snell, or Zach Moss? What do you do if you can pick one, Brandon?
I honestly, my rankings, I have Zach Moss, who is. It looks like he's an equal partner with Devin Singletary right now. They use him in the red zone. He's involved in the passing game, and right now, I need to see this Pittsburgh backfield. James Conner, not 100%. Benny Snell looked awesome last week, the new slimmed down Benny Snell. And so while Mike Tomlin has typically been a guy who's leaned on a featured back, it sounds like he's willing to bring Benny Snell in and play partner here with James Conner. But I think Zach Moss, given the matchup against Miami, and we kind of know where he's at already, looked pretty decent in week 1. At least workload-wise, and that should he should continue to look better and better. As I said repeatedly on this show, a lot of the rookies look, sort of like they were swimming mentally, and I expect all those guys to start looking better and better with each passing week.
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh's backfield is one of the more difficult situations to figure out here as we enter week 2. Michael wants to know, Josh Allen's name is hardly mentioned week to week, but he's still one of the best in the game. I mean, is he a steady QB1 for you guys? Are you at the point where you actually trust Josh Allen without even thinking about playing someone from the wire or whoever your quarterback 2 tends to be? What do you think, Brandon?
I think if you own or roster Josh Allen, or I think you're better off to not watch him and just assume that in the end the numbers are going to be there. Just watching him last week, just airmail John Brown on a couple passes, and the amazing thing is I went and I've looked in his last 13 games played, he's only had 2 interceptions. And I think it's just like when he misses where no one can catch it, and that's but just the rushing side helium that he gets. Yes. There's big plays, at his disposal with Diggs now and John Brown. So yeah, I think he's a locked in QB1, but it's just not going to always be pretty. Mm-hmm. And if you have him, you do yourself a favor and not bother really drilling down on the actual viewing of Josh Allen live during these NFL games.
Josh Allen would be a beast in modern Tecmo Bowl, except for the occasional ball that he throws off the screen. That would happen a little more often with him than most of the quarterbacks. But hey, mobility is key with a quarterback in Tecmo. Question from Mark. Any concern about Preston Williams going against Tre'Davious White? Would you start Deshaun Jackson over Preston Williams, Beller?
Yeah, I would. It's got less to do with White than it does just to do with a little bit of belief in this Eagles offense and that they're going to be able to get things going. We know Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert could be the top 2 pass catchers in this offense, but I really think we're going to see Deshaun Jackson and Jalen Reagor a little bit more involved this week than they were last week. And I wouldn't be surprised to see this game play up into the 50s either between the Eagles and the Rams. So I do like Deshaun Jackson a little bit better than Preston Williams. It reflects more of a faith in Philadelphia's passing game than I have in Miami's necessarily than a huge faith in Deshaun Jackson over Preston Williams. But however you get there, that's how I'm getting there. I think Deshaun Jackson is the way to go in that. And I just want to say on Josh Allen, we haven't talked about Patrick Mahomes. We haven't talked about Lamar Jackson. We haven't talked about Russell Wilson. Josh Allen is nowhere near their class in a real-life sense, but we don't talk about these guys because we don't have to. Of course you are trusting Josh Allen week in, week out, every single week. This guy delivers from a fantasy perspective. It's got a lot to do with that rushing, but you should have no concerns about Josh Allen as your starting quarterback for the rest of the season.
Let's get to some fantasy fill in the blank. We'll get to a few more questions before we sign off, so continue to send those in. We'll answer as many as we can before we end the show at 12:30 Eastern. First one, fantasy fill in the blank. If I had to choose between John Brown and Hollywood Brown in a PPR league, I would want, we'll begin with you, Beller.
Hollywood Brown, absolutely. I mean, they're basically the same player. They have a lot of the same skill set. There's a lot of overlapping skills between these two guys. It's not just the last name. But Hollywood Brown is tied to a little bit better of a quarterback in Lamar Jackson, a little bit better of an offense in Baltimore, and perhaps has some real number one capabilities, whereas John Brown is clearly the number two guy in a run-first offense behind Stephon Diggs. So give me Hollywood Brown. I do like both this week, but if I can only have one, Marquise is definitely the way I'm going to go here.
I think Baylor said it all right there. It kind of checked off all the boxes that you need to compare these two. It's definitely Hollywood Brown for me.
All right, moving right along. Larry Fitzgerald will have blank targets today. What do you think, Brandon?
7. Maybe 4 or 5 catches, maybe 45 to 55 yards. That's kind of where Larry Fitzgerald's at this point in his career. And when the dust settles, probably 75 to 80 catches for the year. And it's amazing he's still going. And but he's about the lowest upside guy that you would consider playing on a weekly basis in like a PPR league. You're not going to get a lot of yards out of him. But he's been consistently getting you the 4 to 5 catches.
So kind of a fringe top 40 receiver at this stage of his career in full PPR. You're talking like a 14-team, start 3 receiver scenario. Maybe there you've got a tough decision to make some weeks. But, yeah.
I think he's a fringe top 50. Like, he's more of the wide
I think that's
receiver.
more
even
right
further.
in line.
Yeah. So not much to get excited about there. All right, let's give you guys exactly 5 words to describe Melvin Gordon's Week 2 performance. Put you on the spot first, Beller.
Yeah. All right. So 5 words. Start him. You'll be happy. I think that's 5 words on Melvin Gordon. Got that backfield to himself, right? And we saw what he did with it largely to himself last week. It might not be the prettiest performance, but he's going to get 15 to 20 touches in this game, at least 15 to 20 opportunities. Can't say for sure how many of those targets that he will catch, but you give a guy like that, I mean, we've seen this for years now, right? It's never the prettiest. It's never the most efficient with Melvin Gordon, but if he gets the opportunities, more often than not, he's going to deliver for you. With Phillip Lindsay out of the picture, he's going to get those opportunities. He's going to deliver.
Yeah, it's
I
fun
was kind of along the same lines. I had surprisingly effective given the opponent. So I'm kind of with Baylor there. We both said
really come up with that on the spot? That's pretty good. That's better than my start him, you'll be happy.
I think batting second in that sort of fill in the blank is a slight advantage. So if we get more of those in the future, we'll be sure to vary out who has to.
I know we are going to get more. If I know who's putting those in the sheet, we are going to get more of those in the future. I'm confident.
We are so ripe for a Ron Burgundy teleprompter situation as our guy Nando DeFino feeds some things into the rundown and onto
How about
the
one
screen.
word next time, Nando? One word.
Let's go to the next one. I don't even know what's coming up next. Latavius Murray is a must blank in 12-team standard leagues in week 2. We'll go to you first, Brandon.
Must start. He's basically set it up as must sit or must start. There's no must in between. So honestly think that this week sets up very well for Latavius Murray against the Raiders. It's not a staunch defense. We saw him get 15 carries out of the gate. I think they're going to lean even heavier on this backfield with Michael Thomas out. And if they can do that and enforce their will with the run and dink and dunk passes to Alvin Kamara, I think they will. And I believe that can actually be a road to success for them. So I'll say he's a must start.
I'll say he's a must watch. How about that? Because we're going to have a New Orleans offense without Michael Thomas for some time here. So I don't think you have to start him. I don't think you have to sit him. Obviously, that's going to depend on what your actual resources are on your team. But we should be watching him very closely because I think we're going to get a good idea of how this New Orleans offense is going to run without Michael Thomas on Monday night against the Raiders. And I mean how they're going to run for the entirety of this Michael Thomas high ankle sprain. And it could be an offense that does pivot a little bit more to using both Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray in big ways. So if that is the case, then I think Latavius Murray becomes a very interesting guy in week 3 through the end of Michael Thomas's injury. So I'm going to say must watch, and we will see just how Sean Payton deploys Latavius Murray tomorrow night.
All right, we've got a nice super flex fill in the blank here. If I had the choice between Mitchell Trubisky, Tyrod Taylor, and Jonathan Taylor, the 2 I'm choosing are, and we'll go to you first, Beller.
Yeah, we have reverse engineered ourselves into a way where we have to bench a quarterback, I suppose, here, because I don't see how you sit Jonathan Taylor. I think realistically, this is probably not going to be a choice for anyone because Jonathan Taylor is not going to be someone who you have to think about benching this week. But if I were really faced with this in the real world, I would sit Jonathan Taylor, or I would sit Tyrod Taylor. You can't sit Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is a top 10 running back, not only this week, but I think for the rest of the season. If we were drafting today, I think we'd be talking about him in that like Joe Mixon range in drafts where we had this thing a couple of weeks ago. And Mitch Trubisky, I mean, Ed Mallion said it a little bit earlier, ended up having a pretty productive game. You had to wait for it, but he gave it to you ultimately, and this Giants defense scares absolutely no one. You can maybe see the sunshine coming in from my window here. I am about, maybe 10, 12 miles from Soldier Field. It's a beautiful day in Chicago. It is a great day to play football, calm conditions, really good day to throw the football around. So I think Mitch Trubisky is actually not only an easy play in Superflex leagues, but not a bad play in 1QB leagues either here today.
Oh, I'm going back to the well in DFS, I think, with Trubisky, which makes me feel awful, but I'm going to do it because I do think there is some shootout potential in that game. Brandon, we got to go to you here because it's possible that as Wisconsin graduates, both Michael Beller and I are higher than we should be on Jonathan Taylor in this situation. Usually we're always saying play your quarterbacks in a situation like this, but is this an exception?
Yeah, well, I'm just, I'm wondering who this person is starting ahead of Jonathan Taylor in his two running back spots. Mm-hmm. I have Jonathan Taylor, I think, 9th this week at running back. And, do you really have two guys better than that? If you do, yeah, I think you still have to start Jonathan Taylor in a super flex spot. I mean, Tyrod Taylor, I'm looking in Yahoo scoring last week, had 9 points. Jonathan Taylor had 11.9, and he had 6 catches, and that kind of helped him out. But he's going to have a lot bigger role this week, and even if Tyrod Taylor does better than he did last week, even if he throws a touchdown pass, runs a little bit, I still think Jonathan Taylor's upside is better than that. I just don't expect them to do too much with Tyrod Taylor week in and week out in the passing game, and where he might end up helping you is games when he does run. But right now, as I said, I think they're going to go as conservative, run-heavy as possible and limit Tyrod Taylor's exposure in this offense as anything more than a game manager.
All right, the hardest hitting question of today's fill in the blank. When we end this show, I'm going to eat blank. You're first, Brandon.
Well, I am on the West Coast. I have not had breakfast yet, so I have eggs and breakfast sausage in my future, and
Ooh.
I am not sure what lunch is going to bring, but we're starting with that.
How about you, Beller?
That ain't bad. That sounds pretty good. I'm in the Central Time Zone, so we're closing in on noon. That beautiful lunchtime of day. I think I might go cheeseburger here for lunch today. It's having that sort of settle in for 10 hours of football feeling to it, obviously, and that's really the best way to get it started. Derek, you and I have fantasy football in 15 to record in about 8-9 hours here, so don't want to get too sluggish in the belly, but still feeling like that's going to be the way to go here for me.
This is going to be an entire season where beer is consumed during the Sunday night game, but not prior to it as a result of fantasy football in 15 being on a late Sunday afternoon recording schedule. Let's get to a few more questions here before we move on to Survivor picks. Sven wants to know in a half PPR league, Cortland Sutton or Anthony Miller? Let's go to you first, Brandon.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to go Anthony Miller here just because we know Sutton's going to play, but we know that he's kind of showing his injury a bit. Anthony Miller's got a great matchup against the Giants secondary that's right up there among the worst in the league, if not the very worst. We like Mitch Trubisky. You guys like him, and I haven't been on record as saying anything about him. I'm going to keep it that way, but if the people that like Trubisky think he's going to do well, then Anthony Miller is going to have to be part of that equation. So I'll go with Miller here.
It's really for the best to never have your name associated with Mitchell Trubisky. Let's go to the question from Steve in a PPR league, Tyler Lockett or Terry McLaurin with that tough matchup against Arizona, Beller.
Right answer is both. I really hate having to pick between these two guys. If I really did have to sit one of these guys down, I would side ever so slightly with Tyler Lockett. I really think that Seattle is going to have themselves a monster game on Sunday Night Football. Both these guys are both top 15 receivers for me, easy. So I would want to find a way to get both of them into my lineup. But I really think that Russell Wilson and this Seattle offense are going to get themselves going on Sunday Night Football here tonight. So give me Tyler Lockett by the slightest of margins.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that Sunday night game. I want to see what New England's actually made of. I don't think they were really tested at all by the Dolphins at home in Week 1. Fernando wants to know, in a flex full PPR league, Mark Ingram, James White, Anthony Miller, Scotty Miller, or Tyler Higbee. What do you think, Brandon?
I'm actually going to go back to Anthony Miller here. It's close. I actually think it comes down to the Millers for me in a full PPR. I know I had the question earlier about Ingram or Scotty Miller in a half PPR, and it was close, and I went with Ingram. I think a full PPR does, though, swing things back to Scotty Miller, but I'm going to go with Anthony Miller, again, in a great matchup. There's not a whole lot outside Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller that they throw to in the passing game, Traequan, but, Miller and Robinson should get a lot of target share this season, and there's not a whole lot of better matchups they're going to run into than the Giants.
All right, last question here from Felipe. Would you start Brandon Ayuk this week? I guess in what circumstances would you feel good about that, Beller?
Pretty deep league. I would have to be sort of exactly that area where we talked about Larry Fitzgerald a couple of minutes ago. 14-team league, got to start 3 wide receivers. I think that's where Brandon Ayuk comes in Week 2. He's another one of those must-watch guys in Week 2 because I think as soon as Week 3 we could be talking about him as someone interesting. But we're talking about a guy who's been dealing with an injury going back for more than a month now, playing his first NFL game. Not the greatest of circumstances against the Jets on the road. You've got George Kittle out. You've got Deebo Samuel out. You've got a very run-heavy offense that maybe is going to turn even more into that. Like, this has a game, the feeling of a game to me on the 49ers side where Kyle Shanahan says this Jets offense is not going to be able to do anything against us. Let's really not show much. Let's come in. Let's win this game like 17-3. Not show off a lot of our offense and get out of here and go home with our first W of the season. So I think we're going to see a pretty vanilla, pretty run-heavy game plan from San Francisco here today, and then we'll maybe run things back on this offense in Week 3.
All right, let's move on to a few survivor picks. Hopefully, you stayed away from the Colts in Week 1 and you're still alive entering Week 2. Funston, let's go to you first. Who is your preferred survivor pick for Week 2?
Well, Beller was just talking about it. I just don't know how the Jets get more than 10 points on the board today. And anything can happen in the NFL, and the ball bounces in funny ways sometimes. But the 49ers just have a defense that should just absolutely thwart a hobbled Jets offense. And they're not going to need a whole lot to win this game in my mind. So I think it's 17-3, maybe 20-10, something very low. But a decided 49ers victory. Give me the 49ers.
What do you think,
Beller? I like that. Yeah, I like that for sure, and I already pounded that under of 41.5. I think that's it feels like too good to be true, but it just also feels like a game that is going to play to a very low-scoring script. I'm actually going back to the Arizona Cardinals here, and I don't hate the Washington Footballs. I actually think they're going to be maybe a sneaky playoff contender with that defense and an offense that can only get better for the rest of the season, and a very competent head coach in Ron Rivera. But I've been buying Arizona for a very, very long time, and I really think that this is going to be a team that takes a major step forward. We're also getting into a little bit of game theory here and pot odds. Arizona, I don't think is going to be hugely popular. I think San Francisco is going to be a very popular pick in Survivor this week. Pittsburgh is going to be a very popular pick. Tampa Bay is going to be a popular pick. And unless you think there is nothing to go to, like last week is a great example. Buffalo was a very popular pick, but I just felt like they were easily the best choice, which is why I backed them. I think Arizona is a fine choice, and you could maybe increase your pool equity if one of those big favorites, one of those really popular ones, goes down. So give me the Arizona Cardinals 90%, 80% because I really, truly believe in them, 10 to 20% because I think it is the smart pool play to go with them.
All right. Who's on upset watch this week? We saw it happen to the Colts with the Jags last week. Could it be the Titans at the hands of the very same Jacksonville team this week?
No A.J. Brown.
That was a -11 when it opened. It's down to 7.5 at this point. You think Jacksonville can pull it off again, Beller?
I think Jacksonville has to be a little bit concerned, or Tennessee has to be a little bit concerned with Jacksonville coming into town. How about a team that got no respect for what it did last week? The Jaguars being one of the biggest underdogs on the board and winning outright. And I think no A.J. Brown really does neuter that offense a little bit. I think they're on upset watch a little here. I think Pittsburgh is on upset watch a little bit here. I think Denver's offense can't keep up with what Pittsburgh is going to do offensively. And as much as it pains me to say it, think New Orleans might be on upset watch a little bit. I just think that Michael Thomas is one of the 5 most indispensable non-quarterback offensive players in the NFL, and it's hard to adjust on the fly without a guy like that with where Drew Brees is in his career. Las Vegas' offense looked really good last week. Obviously, it was a much, much different defense that they saw in Carolina than the one they're going to see tomorrow night in the New Orleans Saints, but that would be one that, I'm not necessarily picking it, but I wouldn't wake up on Tuesday morning feeling shocked if that were the case and the Saints were going into week 3 at 1-1.
All right. How about you, Brandon? Anybody on upset alert that Beller didn't mention?
I wouldn't be shocked if the Cowboys got upset by the Falcons. I mean, the Falcons' defense is bad, but I think the Cowboys' defense is bad now, too. They lost Leighton Vander Esch. They've been losing guys, and their offense wasn't great in week 1 with 17 points. This could turn into a shootout that Atlanta ends up winning. They had a bad loss at home in week 1, and they just might, Dan Quinn's on the hot seat. You could see them coming out and putting forth a really good effort in this one, and I still think it'll be a shootout, but it could be Atlanta that ends up on top in that shootout.
Yeah, that line moved a lot as well. Opened it Cowboys favored by 7.5. It's sitting around 3 right now, so I think you might be onto something there, Brandon. Gentlemen, that is going to wrap things up for our Week 2 episode of the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by Jock Market. You can take control of your fantasy sports experience. Download the Jock Market app now in the App Store. The Android app is coming soon. And remember, you can get all of our written fantasy football content, including Jake's rankings, for just $1 a month at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. It is the best deal around. For Jake Seeley, Brandon Funston, Michael Beller, Ed Malian, Jourdan Rodrigue, and our man behind the scenes, Nando DeFino, I'm Derek Van Riper. Thanks for watching. Good luck in Week 2.